Grateful that you have all joined us. Okay, we are good on all platforms. Thank you all so much again for joining. My name is Nick. I'm the COO for Communication and Outreach at the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. We are so thrilled to be here today with one of our very favorite collaborators and partners in crime during the COVID closure, and that is Kyla on behalf of the Prince George's County Human Relations Commission. The Human Relations Commission has been a really wonderful partner for the library at all times, and especially right now during the closure. So tonight's event is a discussion of the book, What If I Say the Wrong Thing? We're very fortunate to have with us two speakers. One is Kyla, who just showed you the book there. The book is by Verna Myers. Kyla works with the Human Relations Commission and is the guru on all things communications and programs and partnerships. And she works very closely with Renee Battle-Brooks, who's the executive director, who's also been a great friend of the libraries, and I know is watching along tonight. So thank you, Renee, for joining us. And our other guest speaker tonight is Michelle Hamiel, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Public Services at the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. I'm really confident this is going to be a fascinating discussion between two wonderful leaders in our community here. There's going to be an opportunity for everyone to ask questions and to share comments. So please plan to share your questions and comments in the chat box here in Crowdcast or anywhere else that you're watching. We are simultaneously live on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope/Twitter. So we are out there, and we would appreciate your help with amplifying this event. And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Kyla and Michelle, but with one more plug for the fact that the ebook is available for borrowing. It's called What If I Say the Wrong Thing? And if you're watching on Crowdcast, there's a link on the bottom of your screen. It's in a green box. The copies that we have are actually on loan right now, so you can go ahead and put in a hold request, and you'll be in the queue to get those ebooks as soon as they become available. And without further ado, Kyla and Michelle.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Kyla, good to see you again. We've been chatting all night and become my new best friend.
That's true.
I thought I'd get started. I started thinking about when we started becoming what we became known as the Great Melting Pot. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that really went back to about 1908, and it was we called that because of a play with the same name. And it was really when people were coming from, we had all nationalities, all cultures and ethnicities living together. And although we were here in this country together, in this state together, in the county together, in the communities together, many of us have insular personalities. And this book, What If I Say the Wrong Thing, 25 Habits of Culturally Effective People, tells us how to become broad-minded and tolerant of each other. And in chapter 2, Renee Myers, I think, hit the nail on the head when she said, habit number 2, I hope she can drive. Mm-hmm. The insult is actually what that was. And it's how do we overcome the accusations, bad accusations? How do we overcome poor assumptions about particular people? And it is suggested in the book that we have to know our biases first.
Right. And I think, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you go ahead, because I know that you had a story that you wanted to share. So,
well, and I think, to me, this is definitely it's the starting point, which is like recognizing that we have biases. And I will meet people, very beautiful, wonderful, well-meaning people who are like, I was brought up to treat everybody equally, and I don't have any biases. And I'm always like, oh, bless your cotton little socks. I love you. I love that that's your spirit. And I think to realize that we all have them. And so one of the ways to think about this is I'm going to ask you a personal question, if I can, which is,
sure.
Do you have children?
I do. I have 2 children and a grandson, and I have a daughter-in-law.
So when you go out to dinner, with your children, you take your children out to dinner. Do you pay for their dinner?
I do.
So do you pay for the,
Generally.
do you pay, do you pay for the children at the table next to you?
Why would I do that, Kyla?
So that would be, so what is that, right? That's a bias.
That's right. Yeah.
You're paying for your in-group, and your family is your in-group. You're favoring them over those other, what's wrong with those other children? They're not part of your in-group.
Mm-hmm.
That's an example like where you have a bias. It's not a bad. That is not, like, biases are not necessarily bad, but we all have them, right? Like, I live in my house with my family. I don't live I don't go to some stranger's house at night. Like, I have, and so to realize that we all have biases and that they can be, like your family is your in-group, but to recognize these other layers of in-groupness that we have. And there was another chapter in here that made me think of this kind of in-group. Let me hope I can find it. But it was about what does it mean to, when somebody comes in that's not part of your group. So I started a job, I was new at a job, and like nobody spoke to me at my job for like the longest time. And I was like, what am I doing? And they just didn't know me. They weren't feeling like like I was new. I was the outsider. And I think the book helped me think about times when someone's been the outsider to me, maybe in a class or something. And maybe I'm just feeling insecure and I don't want to talk to them because I feel awkward, but what are they experiencing coming in and being new? And so how can I'm getting farther along in the book, but basically to recognize, I think for us all to recognize that we have biases. And some of them can be, I use the example of your children, which would not be problematic, but another example could be, I think my husband's probably listening. So first of all, hi, Dan. And second of all, I'm gonna tell a story about my husband, which is he has a bias. Feel free to jump up in the chat and tell me to stop talking, which is so whenever we're driving and an Audi driver behaves in a way like cuts someone off or is aggressive, my husband's feeling is, oh, Audi drivers, right? Like it confirms a bias he has about Audi drivers, which is really not a problem. It's probably funny. It would only be a problem if he was like at his workplace and he pulled up in an Audi, or he had a friend and they came over in this car and it was really a true issue, and he treated that person, rudely or with less care than somebody else.
So, Kyla, you're talking about some things that most people don't think about. And I think when we think about those implicit biases, we're really talking about those things that we do that are hurtful to people. And in the book, and I skip all over the book, I think it's around chapter 20, where she calls it that aha moment. And I think the ahas in life are important. For me, it was recognizing I had a bias that I did not know exist. I was working in the library and it was against a group of people. And I had this experience where it was closing time. I was walking around closing up the library, and there was a gentleman at the desk, and I went over to ask him if he needed help. And he said no, he was waiting for my colleague to finish what she was doing. And I assumed she was waiting on him. Well, when she finished what she was doing, she had not been waiting on him. She turned to him and asked if he needed help. Well, she couldn't answer the question. She didn't know the answer. She was part-time and wasn't sure of the answer. So she turned to me. When I attempted to answer the question, he put his hand up and he said, I don't want to hear from you. So I knew something was happening with him. And one of my favorite things to say about people is I didn't wake up with that person that morning. And normally I don't take it personally because I knew I had not done anything to him. And I said, fine. I walked away. I went about my business, locking up the library. When they came around to the circulation desk, he had the same question because she couldn't answer it. And he asked someone else who, again, did not look like me. And the person didn't know the answer because that person was also part-time. and the person had to turn to me. And before I could really think about what was going on inside of me, I just said, no, he doesn't want to answer for me. And I walked away from him. Now, even I've worked in public service, been in public services all my life, and I've been treated horribly by people. And I have never been that rude to anyone. I had to take that moment afterwards because I was mad. I was nasty to him. He walked out of there. He didn't get his answer, and I had no intention of ever giving him an answer. But I had to realize what was happening with me, and I realized that I had a bias. And it was sometime after that incident that I realized what was going on, and that's it's the importance of that aha moment, because if you never have those, you never realize you have those biases, and then you can't do anything about it. And it doesn't mean that that bias is going to go away. You have to figure out where that came from. We have to understand that we are products of our environment. We're products of our home, what we've been exposed to. And that the bias just isn't because you recognized it, it just doesn't go away overnight.
Right.
You know, you can have a friend who drives an Audi and then turns around and gets a Ford Mustang. So now that thing has gone away. But whatever else is going on, if it's a bias against someone's ethnicity, against someone's culture, you know, someone's class, that doesn't go away. And we need to figure out, how do we deal with those kinds of things when it's happening and we know that it is because of us. That person didn't do anything.
One of the things that I really liked in this, and I'm glad that you brought up class, is on the very first chapter of the book, she does a sort of chart about what she calls the isms, as racism, sexism, homophobia or heterosexism, religious oppression, classism, elitism. And she separates those two, looks at classism as being socioeconomic class and elitism as maybe education level or sort of place in society. And then, xenophobia, linguistic oppression, ableism, ageism, and militarism. And I just went through that, but I can see the chat. And if people have any questions, please jump in, of course, with questions and we'll try and respond. But I thought that was so helpful for me to sort of see, even now, like in the work that I do and all of that, to still read the book and like look at those things and see like where those things still exist in my own life, like where I may be othering somebody or making assumptions about somebody. And she has a story about meeting, on habit 9, she talks about going to do like a beach cleanup and somebody coming to do the beach cleanup and he looked a certain way. I mean, she says the guy arrived in his pickup truck and he was wearing, dark pants and a shirt with his name on the shirt pocket. He wore a hat, had a beard, a white age, and he's, leading through this, picking up garbage. And then he starts talking about all of this incredible stuff that he knows about the birds and like just his incredibly educated person. And she was surprised. And she found herself being like, why am I surprised? Okay, because of the vehicle he was driving, the way he was dressed, that she recognized that she'd made these assumptions. And so for me, it's helpful to see, sorry, everybody, I have to just adjust. It's helpful for me to see or to be reminded that on the split second, I make assumptions about people based on their appearance. And sometimes those assumptions are positive, and those assumptions are not. And to try to watch that, and I think you have a really good point too, which is recognizing them is just the first step. We have to be right and interested, to do the next. And that's kind of, I have a question for you, which is, so let's say like I realize I have a bias, or maybe, and this is something that we've talked about. So for those watching, Michelle and I have had an opportunity to chat a little bit before this, and it's been great because she's awesome. So I've been very fortunate to get to talk to her.
Thank you. You are too.
Thank you. But one of the things is, let's say that you're, I mean, I'm trying to, you're not part of a certain group of people. And sitting here, maybe you're listening to this conversation tonight and you're like, I want to get to know group X. One of the challenges I think people face is how do I get to know people? How do I can't assume that people want to get to know me. I don't want to insert myself where I'm not welcome. You know, how do we take those steps to engage with people, you know, whose group, that whatever that perceived group is, we don't feel that we're part of? And I think that's a challenge. Do you have any?
So, you know, I'm not one of those people, even though, you know, I teach a diversity course at University of Maryland and I've done diversity training. I am not one to insert myself in a group. I will admit that that's part of my introvertedness. If I don't need to know, that's a horrible way to say that. But if it's a group of people and I don't know them, I may speak to them, but I'm not going to necessarily get to know them unless I have to. So I don't have a great way of doing that. I am never opposed to getting to know people. I think what you told me about, and I want people.
Oh, do you want to tell the story?
You need to tell your story, Kyla,
Okay.
because I'm going to warn people afterwards. But listen to a story, and I admire people who can do this. I'm not that bold.
Michelle might have a comment after I tell my story. So this is actually not a funny story, folks, and I hope people can hear it with a heart of understanding. And if you can't, that's actually okay. And I'm totally willing to take that feedback because I tell the story very openly. So back in the day, hey, I got some buddies here. So I just want to give a shout out to my buddies who are here. But so I'm actually from Canada. We have some Canadians in the room right now. So hi, Canadians. But you can hear my Canadian accent coming out now. So when I was living in British Columbia, I had a situation where I was in a grocery store in a part of town I wasn't normally in. And it was raining and it was just gross. And I just wanted to get in and out of the grocery store. And it happened to be a Wednesday where social assistance check came out. I don't know, what do you call that in America? Do you call that, is that social assistance?
Social services.
Yeah. So, okay. So you got, you know, the check to help people who are down and out, need a little bit of help. So it was the day that check had come in. So when I was in the grocery store, there were a lot of people in the store who were clearly, you know, not at their best moment in their lives, getting their groceries. And I was in the grocery store. I was like, oh my God, I hope nobody talks to me. And I went out and I'm walking on this parking lot and it's raining. And there are people like, this is, you know, these people struggling. And as I walked my car, I was just like, oh, I hope nobody talks to me. And as I was driving home in the rain, I realized that had I seen, you know, a dog that was, I would have taken it home. I would have cared for it. But when I saw other people who were maybe not having their best moments, instead of having a heart of compassion or kindness or saying hello, I walked right by them and hoped that they wouldn't speak to me. And so that prompted me that exact same day to be like, I'm starting a soup night. And that same day I made 2 pots of soup. I put it on Facebook. I went to the grocery store. I told the grocery store, like, if anybody comes in and they're hungry, like, here's my phone number, here's my address. Because I noticed in myself that I had thoughts that were not who I wanted to be. And I started this soup night event, which I did in British Columbia. I've brought now down to Maryland. So y'all come over and have soup with me. This is what Michelle's like, don't do that. But really it was a way to, first of all, it was a way to check myself about just just not the right thinking, and realizing that I was having that and wanting to amend for it. But it's also morphed into this opportunity to bring people together, I open my house, I make soup, I invite people over. I can know you, I can not know you, bring a friend, bring a stranger, I don't mind. Hopefully I won't run out of food. And it's a place for people now who are hungry, whether that's for food or for conversation or for connection, that we can come together and spend time together. So I think something really beautiful came out of, you know, not my best self. But Michelle would like to say something now about having strangers to your house.
Do not invite strangers to your home. And she said that she just lets them in and she doesn't know them. She could have let a mass murderer in. So I don't know that that's the best way to do it, but what I admire, which is why I said I wanted her to share that story, is because it's something that was not so great that was going on inside of her came caused this wonderful soup night to come about, and she gets to know people that I'm never going to get to know. Now, do I help people? Yes. Will I talk to anybody? Yes. And if my daughter were here, she would tell you some of the strangest folks have strange conversations with me. And what is it about me? So I will do that, but I'm never going to be the one to just go up to a stranger and say, hey, you want to have coffee or tea? And that's really what Renee Myers says in the book is if you really want to get to know someone, invite them out to have coffee or tea with you.
Right.
I would have to be in a setting where I know you in some formal way. If you happen to have gotten a job at the library, and I may know your name and that's all I know about you, yes, I'm going to invite you to coffee, tea, and get to know you that way. But a stranger on the street, I am not going to just walk up to and say, I really would like to get to know you. Or I have
Right.
questions
Right.
about your
Right.
culture.
Right.
I have questions about your ethnicity. And would you just sit down and have coffee with me and let me ask you questions? That's never going to happen for me.
Right.
And I admire the people who are able to do that.
Right. And I know that for myself, again, back when I was in Canada, I went and did my undergraduate degree relatively recently as an adult, and I was a Canadian history major, and I really wanted to take a class. There was a First Nation Studies program in our university, and which is down here, you'd say Native American.
Mm-hmm.
Really wanted to take some First Nation Studies courses, and I actually did. I ended up ultimately doing that's my minor. But I remember going from not having taken a course to starting it and feeling so anxious about signing up because I felt like I would not be welcome. And not so much that I was afraid that people would be mean to me, because let's just say that in that particular case, I would be willing to take it. but also not wanting to, that if that's a space for other folks, I didn't want to insert myself in a space where I was like ruining the space for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that can limit people. And one of the things, and you and I've talked about this, and I just, for those people who are listening, one of the challenges that I think we both felt about the book is it has lots of tips about how to be like your best self or a better version of yourself, but it doesn't necessarily help you know how to, like it has a lot about inside here, but it doesn't necessarily have a lot about actions that you can take that are really painful, I would say.
Mm-hmm. It does deal a lot with actions someone else can take. So, for example, someone can, because I find myself in those situations a lot, where being a African American female executive, and I am the minority, not necessarily in Prince George's County as a whole, but in some of the places I have to go, I may be the minority, and I'm not my responses or are not taken seriously. Sometimes things that I've already said don't become validated until someone, white male, says, "Oh, the very same thing." And the book doesn't say how I should respond.
Right.
My daughter-in-law has her PhD, and she's talked about one of the very first meetings, and she does something with university campuses, and she was the only African American female in the room, all PhD holders. No one that young, because at the time I think she was 29. So she has this powerful position, only African American, and she's young. And when the meeting got started, someone looked to her and said, you needed to bring the coffee to this meeting. And so
I've got to
yeah.
I mean, I think it's like, I'm not shocked. I am not shocked, but I'm also like, I just can't even believe it. But I can believe it. But also,
yeah. Right. And they live down south. So And not to say that that's how Southerners behave, but I wanted you to get a picture of the room and what they must have been thinking. And again, probably not assuming that they had done or said anything out of the way. But this book, and I love Renee Myers. I had an opportunity to sit and talk with her not long ago. And most people do say Verna, and she did correct me, and her name is Renee.
Okay. But, that's the accent over the A, I guess, hey?
Yeah. She, but one of the things this book does not do is tell you how you as an individual should handle that. If someone else heard it, the book does go into what you could do to when you feel bad for someone else who's been put in that position. And that's it's a helpful hint, but no one, I mean, nowhere in this book does it say how I should respond to my colleagues who've done it. Or what do you do when it's your supervisor who puts you in those kinds of positions? Or, you know, or if you are in a position where if you say something, you do run the risk of being blacklisted or isolated, or in some cases never called upon to participate in any activity or meeting, or, you know, so I really wish she had dealt with that. I want her to do another book on tips for the individual. Because she says something like, you know, we go into modes, if we'd heard it, we would go into a mode of apologizing for someone else, which I don't think you can do. You can't apologize for someone else's behavior.
But I've done that exact same thing. I know what you're talking about, but I think you're correct that it's not ours to apologize for.
Yeah, and I think we really have to go to the individual and let them know what they did, and how they made you feel. Not necessarily, because you don't know how they made the other person feel, but how they made you feel, and what you hope they would do. I've had that case where a colleague, I was disrespected in front of a colleague, and I know the colleague felt bad for me, but the colleague didn't know what to do at that moment, and I know what I had wished would have happened. But I couldn't be angry with my colleague because I know my colleague had never been put in that position before and didn't know what to do. And even some of the tips that she gives in this book don't necessarily address what I think. I don't think it effectively addresses how someone who observed or heard something that was hurtful, how they should address it. Because like I said, she said something about, you know, apologize for the person, or say, I hope that never happens to you again. You kind of let that person know that you don't agree with what just happened, but it's not addressing the problem. One of the things that she talks about in Habit 16 was, aren't you scared to live there? And if you see something, say something. And that's really what we're talking about. You know, and I faced it all the time. Oh, she's so articulate. And no colleague would ever step up and say, well, what does that mean? You know, it's something I hear a lot. And no one has ever said, well, what did you expect? So it's, and that puts people in an uncomfortable situation.
And so people are saying, oh, excuse me, sorry. I'm so sorry for all of you. Does everybody feel like they're a little seasick right now? I'm sorry. So, yeah, and those things that, like, so for instance, you're saying people have said that about you, and it to be complimentary that you are so articulate, correct? So nobody has ever said that about me, and arguably, it may be because I'm not articulate, but I don't think that is what we're talking about. So how do you? So here's somebody probably meaning something complimentary, not understanding that they must have had some kind of expectation that was incorrect in order to think that it's notable, you know, that the way you speak versus the way that I speak is notable. Yeah. And so and so I think that is the question. And I know that the book, like, what I love about the book is how it helps those of us who are trying to, and I think is hopefully everybody who's listening, that's why you're all here, is, how can we get along better? How can we make it a nicer place in our own little ways? And in my opinion, and I do a lot of work trying to counteract hate and bias. And really my message that I give people all the time is that, probably on a large scale, those of us in this room don't have a lot of power, but where we have power is in our neighborhoods, the coffee and tea situation, the soup night that I will be having and you can all come to, but Michelle probably won't come. But by building relationship on a local level and between people, that's the power we have. Where I think and the book helps with people with that mindset. But really, how do you, and I think this is a question I love, comments or also from the people who are watching, is just, my experience has been, the other thing is, it's awkward, is I've never changed a single person's mind by yelling at them.
That's right.
Is saying something that's hurtful to me or that I'm bystanding and I'm seeing happen to somebody else. How do I engage with that person in a way that isn't volcanic, even if that may be my experience? Because at least my experience has been, I've never changed anyone's mind. And if my goal is to try to build relationship and bring that person along, how do we do that?
Yeah, and with me, it's more that I get enraged and but I hold on to it and I just will smile at them and I'll thank them because I know you're limited. But there is that tiny part of me that wants to get angry and wants to say, exactly what did you think? And it could be, oh no, it was just a compliment.
Right.
But I can tell you, I've never, not once have I ever addressed someone who said that to me. And I don't know why. And maybe this book will give me the courage to say, what did you mean by that?
That is such a great question, right? What did you mean by that? And I've heard people say, like, when someone says something and you're like, and they're like, oh, it was just a joke, that you say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't get it. Could you explain it to me? And then typically if you do that will help the person be like, oh, this is awkward. I can't explain this joke that I made, So one of the things I wanted to talk about was, and I'm not sure if we have time, but it may be something that when we go into the discussion period that I know Nick will be moderating shortly. So, and we've addressed this, and it's Habit 20. She talks about, having coffee or tea, this whole idea of somebody one-on-one, which is I'm a firm believer of. I mean, I think that's the key way to make relationship. But what do we do in the time of COVID-19? How do we build relationship and connection and help our neighbors and help our community, now? And this is not covered in the book.
I don't know. It's obviously COVID-19 or pandemics. It's not covered in the book.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting because we found new ways to connect with people. And, you and I met because we were going to do another event together, but we probably would not have had the opportunity to have the one-on-one conversation if we had not been planning this event. Right. And I think some people might even be safer or feel safer if it was this kind of event where they just invite a lot of people who are different in some ways and have conversations. So, everybody's on equal footing here. It's a good way you can kind of throw anything out there. At least I've been to virtual happy hours. I've been to virtual birthday parties. We're trying to figure out how to plan my daughter-in-law's virtual shower. I hope she's not really listening, because if it was going to be a surprise, I've ruined it. But
I'll tell you, my dad is listening, and he had a surprise virtual birthday party just a week ago. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
So it's an opportunity for people to come together, and I think people are more willing to be open and honest in this kind of form, because you're not face to face, and it's hard. Yeah, when you're in someone, if you're face to face, or in the same space, a personal space, I think it's harder to ask some of the questions that we really want to ask each other. Because, and that's one of the tips in the book that, and I can't remember where it is, but it says, ask the question. It was early on in the book, but it said something about, rather than make the assumption about someone, it says, it was, do you know how to do this? Or I know you've never done this before, but it was really because someone made an assumption, because whoever they were talking to, they made the assumption that the person didn't know how to do it. It's sort of what happens to a lot of young people. People make the assumption because they are young, they know how to use all types of technology. And so, they'll turn to them and say, here, can you do this thing? Simply because they're young. And it does not mean that that is the case. And the better thing to do would be, do you know anything about this? Without making an assumption. So it is true. And I think, people make the assumption that all Asians are good with math, and they'll just say, oh, Aaron knows how to do this because Aaron is Asian. And, those are just wrong assumptions.
I have literally been at someone's house, and I was going to cook some food, and I'm afraid of lighting the barbecue because I'm sure I'm going to blow myself up. So because it's going to be in the news later, right? And so I have never even tried to light the barbecue. But I remember being at someone's house, and I was gonna cook the food, and there was a young man there. He wasn't a member of the household. He was a friend visiting, but he was a boy, and a young man. And I said, "Could you light the barbecue?" I didn't ask if he knew how or what. I mean, he could have felt just as not confident as I did, but because he was a man, assumed that barbecue lighting was in his skill set. It's crazy. But there are these things that and I'm assuming I'm not the only one.
Yeah, no.
I'm sorry for everybody listening if you've never done these things. But I mean, I just know that here's this, without even thinking about it, I was like, I do not want to blow myself up, but I'm confident you will not blow us up. So you go and do it. And I'm sure there's all kinds of, things like that I probably do all the time.
We all do. And I think one of the things that we have to learn to do, and she talks a little bit about it in the book, is we have to be able to forgive ourselves. And again, it's back to those aha moments. Forgive yourself for that thing that you did, and then make a change. And if you're not willing to forgive yourself, then you can't move forward. You get stuck where you are. And she also talks about that. We put people in a box. And because of their ableness, their class, their race, their whatever, their ism, we put them in a box, and we don't let them come out of the box. And when we make a mistake, we chalk it up as a mistake and we go on. I think that we have to get to a place where we're willing to forgive ourselves, to admit that we've done something wrong. And that's hard for most people, to admit that they've done something wrong, that they've insulted someone, and then go back to that individual and get to know them. And be willing to say, hey, I thought when I first met you, this is what I thought. Forgive my thought, but now I see, and I'd like to get to know you better. That's some of what we have to do, and not everybody's willing to do that. I think that this book is a good start, but like I said, it's not, it didn't have everything I wanted in it. But I love it for someone who's been through some diversity training, looking to do more, because, diversity training is never over. We have to remember that. We should always look to improve ourselves, because it is about us, not about others. And if you're looking to stay on track, this helps you stay on track. But it doesn't help you as the individual, who and how to get people to I don't want to say, because I don't care whether you accept me, but I do need you to respect me. And I think that is what this book gets at. It really does get at, how do you learn to respect everyone?
And that's what I think. I mean, I will say this for people who are listening or watching or curious. For me, I thought this was a wonderful roadmap. Like, it really, there's definitely gaps as we've sort of been addressing. And I think some of that is gives us an ability to use our own creativity. But I think in terms of just, I mean, actually before, so even before the event started, I was anxious. I'm going to be on the computer with all of you people. And I was like, what if I say the wrong thing? And I thought, what a great title, because I had this anxiety. And for me, it wasn't necessarily an anxiety in terms of that I was going to say a culturally insensitive thing. That wasn't my worry, but it was just, I don't know if you felt like this, Michelle. You're going to be talking to however many people we're talking to tonight. And what if something comes out and you have this, and you can freeze up. But I think what the book helps with is this idea that if you come into things with a heart of openness, and that you're making effort to connect with people and with this open heart, that really to some extent there isn't a wrong thing, because hopefully people will receive you in the way that you're going forward, including maybe giving you some of that feedback. Like, hey, Kyla, that wasn't your most fine moment, and then you get to readjust and try again. And I think that's, the book really helps set a foundation of relationship.
And I think somebody made the comment, it says diversity is part of our everyday journey in some way or another. And you're absolutely right. We cannot live in this world and not grow. And it's like the person said, it's part of our everyday journey. We are always going to face something or someone that's different from us. And what the book does do is give us, like you said, some tools to use to improve who we are. And but it is not, you can't read this book. I don't want anybody, because it gives you some tips. It tells you to take the implicit bias test from Harvard University. And it is a great test. I took it, and I've taken it a couple times, because like anything else, you're answering. I know sometimes I'm answering based on what I think of myself as opposed to what I really do. So it does give you some great tips, but it is not going to, you're not going to read this book and say, I'm never going to make a mistake again. I am going to be culturally effective. You'll be working toward it. And this is a good tool, and it's an easy read. I really do think it's an easy read. You get it. She gives some practical examples. One of the stories that she doesn't tell it in this book, but one of the stories that she's told is being on an airplane, and the pilot was female. And the pilot talked about, it's going to be turbulence ahead. And her first thought was, are we going to make it? She said the only reason she had that thought was because it was a female pilot. And this is someone who has trained all over the world, diversity training all over the world. And she still has those biases and willing to share that. And I think that's what we need to do. Share our story.
I think her willing, and that is in the book. It's in chapter 2. That's the I Hope She Can Drive one, where but her original thought when she heard the female pilot was that she was so delighted to hear a woman until there was some turbulence, and then it was like, oh my gosh.
Right.
And I think your point, being willing to share when we have biases, again, in an open, I've realized that I did this. I think it does allow, and that was one of the things I love that she did in the book, was she talked about her own awareness, her challenges, times that she, and as you said, she is, if anybody should be able to say, I don't have any biases, somebody who does all that work, and for her to show us where she's met those challenges. I think for people, for those of us who maybe struggle to see where we are having biases, or struggle to see where maybe we have opportunity to grow, by showing that and being so open with her own experiences and challenges, I think it makes it easy for the reader to have a, to be able to look at themselves in a like not frightened way about what they might find if they check out what's going on within them.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other thing is, and I mentioned it earlier, is this book really does state that people just want to be respected.
Right.
And I think that what's not in the book is, if you treat people better than you ever expect to be treated, then you can't go wrong. Now, if you don't think a whole lot of yourself, now you got to figure that out too.
Right.
But you start by just treating people better than you expect to be treated. Then you won't go wrong. And it's treat everyone that way. It is, I think it is hard to go out and do what you do. Just invite some person standing at the grocery store to your home for dinner. But if you do see that individual, just treat that individual with respect. And when you have the feelings that crop up, recognize that feeling, try to figure out where that feeling came from, and then how do you get rid of that feeling so that you don't hurt the next person. And I also would want to say that this book has some good tips for us, I think, as individuals, just to be, because, going back and reading it, and you and I did the same thing. It's okay, we've read it once, now let's go back and look at it with a different eye. It does give you, I think, some courage. When I say it gives you some courage, some things that I might not do after reading this book, I would try. And then after listening to you with the soup, maybe I'll do coffee. Somebody I don't know.
So for those people listening, I will just say that when I told Michelle when we were on the phone about my soup night, and I was like, you can come, she was not happy to hear my story about inviting strangers to my house. So Prince George's County does not advocate you inviting strangers to your house. This is something that Kyla does.
Right. Yeah. And cool. I told Kyla I was going to come to her house for dinner, but not when she's having strangers.
Cool. Well, this has been a riveting discussion. I can definitely tell how we could be doing this for hours and hours and hours, because it's really interesting. So if it's okay with both of you, we can turn it over to Q&A now for the rest of our time together.
Sure.
Okay. We've had a few questions come in throughout. The first one is from Jeanette, who says, Michelle, please expand on the incident with the guy at the library who had a question but did not want you to answer it. And you got an insight about yourself, huh? Was the man of a different race?
He was of a different ethnicity. And I did not realize that I had a bias against someone from that particular ethnic group. And it was because of my belief. We generalize people, and we put people in groups, and we say people from particular ethnic groups or particular cultures, this is how they behave. Well, that's what went on in my mind. And this particular person, I believed, well, by the way, he treated me too, but do not like women. But what I had done, and when I say it was that aha moment, is I had grouped every male from that particular group together. And I know that's not the case. It's just like I don't want everyone to say that all African Americans are alike. That's what I had done, and that was my aha. And that is why I so willingly was nasty to this man. And when I say nasty, I just refused to wait on him. But I would not have done that with anybody else. Does that answer your question?
Jeanette, please let us know in the chat box if that answered the question or not. And she said yes. Great,
Yes.
very good. Okay, thank you. Next question is from Lynn, who asks, Michelle, your story about the guy who didn't want to hear from you is interesting. It's pretty clear what his bias was. I'm curious as to what you think your bias was. I think that might be related.
Yeah, I think I may have answered the question. It was against people from that particular ethnic group.
Great, thank you. And then next question is from Jeanette. I think did you answer this already in the chat, Michelle? Or someone did. Michelle, what did your daughter do when... Oh, your daughter answered.
Oh.
Michelle, what did your daughter do when the man asked her about bringing coffee? And the answer was, I did not get the coffee. I kindly explained that, in fact, I was the face they were receiving emails from and was the one hosting the meeting. Well, thank you.
You'd have to know my daughter-in-law. She could do that.
Very cool. So I'm going to scroll through here on the chat to see what else we've gotten. If anyone else has other questions, please feel free to type them in and we will share them with Michelle and Kyla. And we have friends viewing from Hawaii, which is awesome.
Yay.
I feel like you all have a much prettier climate than we do right now over here in our winter light that's been continuing.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 more questions here. This is a question from Mark. Kyla, have you ever been uncomfortable about anyone who showed up at your soup night?
No, actually, my soup night has actually been one of the most truly wonderful, magnificent things that has ever happened in my life. Like, I have made friends. I've had it has just been, I can't even describe it actually, like what an incredible gift it has been in my life. And I said I did it in Canada. I've done it now that I live in Maryland, and it's just been awesome. It's been awesome. But I will also say I've had people I don't know come. And I've had people, bring friends of a friend, but also somebody just saw it on the internet, Michelle. Somebody saw it on the internet and came. But,
on the internet, you didn't tell me you put it on the internet.
They saw it on the internet and they came. And but
does your husband know you do this? Does he live with you?
He does. We're still married, as in fact, and he's actually helped. He's actually helped with soup night. But anyway, yeah. So truly, I haven't had any negative experiences. It's been really, really awesome. But I do realize, and I feel like I do need to say this as a disclaimer, I also probably have been very fortunate. Michelle would like you to not do this at home, kids.
Yeah, please don't.
Right.
I read a lot of mysteries. So.
Right, I know. I'm sorry. I feel like this conversation is getting derailed here.
So
it's been a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. So if there are any other questions, feel free to type them in. We've got a few minutes left. I would love to throw out one question for both of you. And that is, it's probably not going to be a very well-formed question, but there's so many different labels that get applied to folks, whether it's ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic status, where they live, that kind of thing. In the conversation about diversity, at least in my experience and where I've been involved with them, there's often a very hierarchical sense of what gets discussed the most in those diversity conversations. And there's, in my experience at least, there's been a race is kind of always front and center with it, which it is very clear why that is, and it should be in many ways. But oftentimes, like in past organizations I've worked in, where we've had 2 DEI programs a year for the staff, one of them might end up being all about race, the other one might be about gender equity, and then everything else is not even brought into the room. How can we take the lessons from this book and kind of apply them to making sure that the conversations we have as institutions and in our kind of groups of teams and stuff are creating space for all of the different topics that need to come into the conversation, whether that's sexual orientation or family status or where you're from originally, what your language skills are. One of the things that comes up a lot in our work right now is immigration. And the whole kind of way we refer to immigrant communities and serve immigrant communities doesn't always make it into the diversity conversation. So just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Nick, I honestly think that sometimes it is really based on the facilitator or trainer's experience, or their lack of knowledge, or their uncomfortableness. I've been to trainings, all different types of trainings, and I can tell you that for me as a trainer, here I go, opening my mouth and being vulnerable. For me, I worry the most about offending someone who is who identifies LGBTQ questioning, and the reason is because if I don't know you personally, I don't know how you identify, and I don't want to ever insult. So when I'm doing my trainings, I kind of stay away. I address it like I'll talk about gender neutral restrooms and all of the things that I believe in. But if I had to really dive in, I know that that's what I know the least about. And the last thing I would ever want to do is have a diversity training, talk about respecting everyone, and then say or do something in the training where I offend. And that is just me trying to get to know more. I need to know more before I feel comfortable. And I think that, like in some of my trainings, I've done some training on ableism and pointed out some things, but I've not walked in those shoes. And until I had my surgery. And so it's certain things that you don't recognize. And for me, I talk mostly about what I live. And while I have gay friends, I have transgendered friends, I know them, but I would not be comfortable if I was trying to address a group. So for me, it's just lack of knowledge. And I think that's the case for many trainers. And and the thing that I don't like is theory. Any class that I teach, I stay away from theory because we all know that's not the real world. And it's really important that I at least try to put myself in a place where I really know or have experienced. What do you think, Kyla?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that you're saying. I think that and also as Nick said, that there are some things that are centered, and there's an appropriate reason for them to be centered. I also think it's true that some things get lost, and I hit this when we were just discussing the book too. Like one of the things, again, that I really appreciate that she talked about was elitism, which is classism, and I have been on the receiving end of that and I don't know what it's like, again, I'm just going to speak from my experience from where I'm from, but to be a fat single mother with a high school education in Canada, that was a lot. There was a lot. There was that as it fit a stereotype of something, and that people treated me a certain way, because of what it means to be all of those things as one package. And so, which is also part of the reason why I reacted the way that I did when I caught myself, not my best self about people who were struggling economically, But my point is, I think those things exist, but the societal structures that impact, obviously, race. I think we're seeing some discussion about immigration in the United States, particularly right now, about immigrant experience. But there's reasons why those are such big picture items. And I sort of think they have to be, and they need to be. It would be great if we could bring in some of these other things. And I think that's a process. And maybe we can just, you know, in terms of like large scale trainings, that's going to be a bit of a process, I think.
And when we did the training in Prince George's County, we did, you know, homelessness training. We did LGBTQ training. So, and Jaylene and I did diversity training in general, so that you can get different perspectives. And I think it's a well-rounded or centered education. But if you do rely on one person, then it tends to be focused mainly on those big items. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you both for your comments on that. We have one additional question from Brianna, who asks, what do you do when your own ethnic group shuns you because you are assimilating with other groups?
So in the African American community, when you assimilate with, there's this thing where they say you're acting white. And so they call you an Oreo. I think that the only thing you can do is be yourself and, you know, be able to be well-rounded, which means do some of the things that it's talked about in the book, where you're inviting others, you're getting to know people, and you know, it's right back to when someone says, almost gone full circle, when someone says, oh, you're so articulate. If an African American, because that's almost like reverse racism, if an African American says you're acting white or she's an Oreo, doesn't that mean that they think behaving in a certain manner means you aren't acting as they expect you to act? So, you know, you can only be who you are. And hopefully that's a well-rounded individual. And you shouldn't worry too much about what others think of you as long as you are happy with yourself. And I think, Kyla, because we talked a little bit about that before, because you said there was something in Canada, it's called an apple.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something that I've had friends been accused of. So these are First Nations folks being called by, you know, other people in their group an apple, which again is like the acting too white or acting too, you know, subtler. And I think that's the, you know, and I think you touched on this, which is there's an invisible side of that, which is saying that is there only one way to be a person? You know, and we all know that, and that's what so much of, I think, the struggle is, right? Like, so for women, there's so many different ways to be a woman, and that you can be a woman and be all kinds of different things, or, you know, and we fight for this. And then if you have, so I'm just use this example, then if you have women criticizing women for behaving a certain way, those women are still stuck in the mindset that there's only one way to be a woman. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, and I think that the folks in those groups, like when we do that to each other, unfortunately, it's just a sign that we're stuck in this really narrow way of thinking about what it means to be in this group. So.
I'm reading somebody's comment.
Yeah. No, me too. I saw it too. Yeah.
So the comment, just for the sake of folks who are watching on other platforms, is from Lynn, who responds to Michelle by saying, you are absolutely right about being called an Oreo. I've experienced that. It was one of the most difficult experiences of my life, which I came to understand only when I got older. Thank you for sharing that, Lynn. We appreciate your being brave enough to share that with us.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. And you know, part of diversity training is making yourself vulnerable, and I do that a lot. Which I don't understand why, because you know, it puts you in an uncomfortable spot. But if you don't put yourself out there, sometimes you aren't open to the truth, and if you're not open to the truth, then you can't change. And I always want to improve who I am. I recognize that I have biases. I recognize that I'm not always a good person. But I do also recognize that I always mean well. I never intentionally try to hurt anyone. And I try not to be a mean and angry person, and then try to respect everyone who crosses my path. But it is a process, and it is a daily walk. If you aren't vulnerable, you cannot make changes, and that has to be part of that diversity process. And that is what she's saying. That's what Kyla does when she invites anybody to soup to her house. Renee Myers suggests coffee or tea in a public place.
In a public place.
Kyla, this has been wonderful. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
Thank you.
We have to do it again.
Absolutely.
And as soon as we are post COVID-19, you and I will get together for dinner.
Absolutely. It's been fantastic. Nick, thank you so much. And to Prince George's County Memorial Library System, you folks have been so good to us and to the community, and we are so grateful to get to participate with you.
Oh, well, thank you. It's this has been of all the craziness that's come out of COVID, one of the real highlights that has kind of helped round out the experiences the way that we in the county have been working together as a team across agencies and organization types, and even how long people have been in the county has kind of been irrelevant to it. Everyone's really banded together, which has been really special, and I don't think it's happening in this way everywhere, even locally. So,
and your team's a rock star, Nick. Thank you. Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you all for participating. I had a good time.
Yeah,
awesome.
me too.
This will have to be a regular chat with you two.
Okay.
We'll bring you back.
I think so.
Okay.
You should be on some of our phone calls. They're much more fun.
Yeah.
And then we'll have the late night edition with martinis sometime.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you all. Be well. And if you haven't checked out What If I Say the Wrong Thing yet as an ebook, you can do that with the green button on the bottom of the screen on Crowdcast. Somehow, nobody has added to the hold list this whole program. So get on it, or you're going to be behind a bunch of people. And that'll do it for tonight. Thanks, all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Be well.
Bye.
Bye.